Hello everyone. This is not Britain's Hangout Hour, but this is a another discussion video today. I'm here with Darko from Kindles and Kicks. How you doing, man? This is you haven't even gotten on Britain's Hangout Hour yet, and we're doing a discussion today.
I know, man. I mean, it's great to be here. This is my first time on another BookTube channel.
That's good.
So, yeah, it's kind of exciting. It's a big moment for me, and
Yeah, and even though like I only have like 100 more subscribers than you, check him out. He's a cool guy. He's got
no,
way better. He's got way better video quality than I do. I'm just like, oh man.
man, but you're like a far better reviewer. You're so well read. Like, it's ridiculous.
Anyway, so what are we talking about today? We're talking about, or at least we're talking about Kindred. Here's my copy I got here. He read it on his Kindle. So, but yeah, I got my copy
Yes.
of Kindred here, by Octavia E. Butler, and it was kind of funny how this sort of buddy read started because I was like, I'm just gonna read this in February, and then you were like, hey, I'm gonna read it around the same time. You just want a buddy read, and I was like, okay. So here we are.
Yeah, it was, yeah, it was,
It's kind
it
of an
was very
accident.
fortuitous. It was pretty fortuitous. For my sake, it was made it more fun to read with someone else.
Yeah, but I was kind of I was reading this and I was kicking myself because I hadn't read Octavia E. Butler before this point because I thought this book was really good.
Yeah, neither have I, even though I had heard of her, of course, in numerous discussions and top 10 sci-fi lists. She had never been an author that I was particularly interested in reading. But I was, in February, I said I have to read someone, particularly African American author I had never read before. So, yeah, and everyone recommended Kindred. Every Octavia E. Butler booktuber who was a fan, they're like, yeah, Kindred is the one to start with.
Yeah, I mean, Kindred, not that long. It's like 260
Hmm.
something pages, so I mean, it's not very long for me anyway. I completed it pretty quickly because luckily, Butler is not too overly complicated with her prose. It just kind of moves. Um, and it was a pretty quick read. I had a lot of thoughts. Excuse me.
Yeah, it definitely will keep you up at night sometimes. Kind of considering what's the context of the book and the content of the book. It's very unique and unforgettable experience, at least for me.
Um, but I also thought it would be interesting since I'm a 22 going on 23-year-old white man, and I don't know how old you are, but you're a black man, so I thought it would be interesting hearing. I thought with this discussion, it would be interesting hearing our perspectives and how they might be similar and how they might diverge. Because, well, I thought this book was really interesting, but also I gathered some interesting insights as I was reading through it, or I found some interesting insights as I was reading through it. What did you think of it as you were kind of going through it? I mean, I know we had talked a little bit and we were kind of sharing some thoughts, but like, what did you think of it?
No, overall, the book was incredible. Like you said, Octavia Butler's prose, while not overly complex, still grips you, particularly when describing the antebellum South
Mm.
and what the main character goes through. It's pretty difficult to read at times, especially as a black man. And I'm not as young as the main character. I'll be 40 actually on Friday.
Oh,
But
happy birthday.
well, thank you. uh, but just sitting there and kind of thinking how I'd react or how I'd handle that time period coming from 2024 and like kick back to 1824 and to kind of think if I was forced to be a slave and I had no choice in the matter, particularly if like my future could be compromised, like my future could be changed if I acted in a certain way, like if I protected myself or did anything to change things on the plantation. So um, it really, it really gets you thinking a lot, and also makes you recognize how fortunate we are in this time period, despite how much longer we or how much more we have to grow and progress amongst the races.
Mm-hmm.
We have come pretty far considering what the main character endures when she has to go to a plantation, and then in Maryland and where I live, which was really
Yeah,
crazy.
I remember
You
you
know?
texted me and you're like, dude, I know this place. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, yeah,
What?
yeah, that was insane. Like I had to Google Octavia Butler to make sure she wasn't from Maryland, and like, because how do you know these towns? So, but she was not. She's like from Pasadena. Like she did her research. So,
Yeah, I had heard of Kindred for a long time, but you know, I just hadn't gotten around to reading it until this year. Anyway, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. At least in February, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna read Kindred. I'm gonna see how it is. And this book is one of those where it feels like it was entirely what it was supposed to be. They're never. I don't usually love hearing when people say this, but I'm gonna be a hypocrite here.
hmm
Um, no word in this feels out of place. I mean,
hmm
even like when and it's also like it's not entirely a bleak fest. I mean, there's not. This isn't a fun book by any means, but there's also some moments that it's pretty funny. Like there's some funny bits in here, and there's also a
yeah,
lot of heart too, at times. And aside from the serious reflections on race relations in America, as well as the scars of the past, which I think is an interesting segue. I don't know what you thought of that, but that was kind of what I was thinking as I was reading through it.
there are some hopeful moments, particularly with Dana's husband Kevin.
Mm.
He really impressed me as a character because as a white man, he could have easily just allowed his white privilege to protect him
Mm.
in that situation. But he chose to be a stand-up guy, which I don't know would be something a lot of us or anyone would do if they give given an opportunity. And so that to me, that gave the book a lot of heart and a lot of hope. And but it was interesting though, like how sometimes he had to be reminded, like, okay, this might not look that bad for you, but there's still black people being sold and chained and brutalized. Don't
Yeah,
forget
and he's
that.
like, "Oh yeah, that's right." Oh.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, his white privilege was still there, but I'm glad that he made it. He more than made up for it, in my opinion, in the
Yeah, I
book.
was kind of like, yeah, I'm proud. He did the right thing. He could have
Yeah.
easily
Yes.
not done that.
Yes, he could. And it's interesting that the time period that she goes back to, she has to face her ancestors, which I thought was an interesting premise for a story. Uh, I
I
mean, for anyone, if you had to go back in
I
time and yeah, go ahead.
I thought it was intriguing, and I also wondered as I was reading through the story. I'm like, is that like? I'm curious if that was the reason for the time travel, because well, they never explain it, but I just had that
hmm
inkling that like maybe them being related somehow had something to do with it. I don't. I could be wrong. Only Butler would be able to know, and she's passed away now, so she probably and also she probably isn't going to tell us. She probably wasn't
No,
going to
she's
tell us
not.
even if we asked. But
Not at all. And I guess essentially, maybe she did that on purpose because she didn't want the time travel to be like, I guess, the point of the story at all, or even focused on. And it's more about the narrative of Dana having to basically fight for her ancestors' slave owner to survive, or um. So I mean, well, it's her ancestor and both ancestors slave owner. So I think that was interesting watching those dynamics and her getting to know him, the good and bad, because he had moments where you felt sympathy for him.
mm-hmm.
You felt bad, but then you had other moments where you're like, I wish he would die.
Yeah, I remember I texted you. I'm like, yeah, he's gone into full asshole territory now. He's just he's
Yeah,
just he's
exactly.
gone off the rails now. You're like, yeah.
Yeah,
But
and
I thought I guess to for those who wonder what Kindred is about, and also we're gonna spoil the crap out of this. So I go read the book, come back, then watch this. But
yeah.
Kindred is about this lady named Dana. I think it's pronounced Dana, but I could be wrong.
Hmm.
As she starts randomly time traveling for some reason back to the antebellum South, where she meets her um, ancestors, which is a white guy named Rufus. Well, she initially goes back. She saves the life of this white kid named Rufus, who basically becomes the and it's basically explores their relationship as the story moves along. And we also see she has a white husband. She accidentally brings him back in time, accidentally leaves him back in time.
Oh my God.
He goes through some stuff, and she ends up going back. It's crazy. But basically, the core of this book is about really the race relations in America, as well as the kind of scars of slavery that still kind of hit us to this day. Because I noticed as this book was going along, and she talks about when she's back in the present, there's this sense that like things haven't changed as much as we'd like to think. And
Yeah, that's very true. That's definitely a strong message in the book, which
yeah,
is,
and
it's
she's
kind of sad.
like, she goes like, because like she talks about getting married to Kevin, and she was raised by her uncle and aunt, and they're kind of like, okay, I guess it's okay.
Yeah,
Apparently Kevin's sister's like, hell no, I like, marrying a
I
black.
know.
You're like, what?
Yeah, I cannot believe that. And that was the books in the '70s, I think, and that's like right after the civil rights movement, and you think there would have been some progress, but
I mean,
it's a
okay.
shame.
I won't pretend like nothing has changed. I mean,
Yeah,
we can sit here and have this conversation as equal men now, compared to like back then, where if that happened, I probably would have been looked at as I like got dropped on my head or something. Unfortunately,
right,
but
right.
there's still like there's that sense that she's reflecting on the fact that I don't want to say animosity, but that tension has never fully gone away, and she's
No,
not
it
happy
hasn't.
about it. I mean, my
Yeah,
God,
even
and you think about stuff that's happened. I mean, I don't want to get too social here, but you see like Black Lives Matter and that stuff, and you
hmm
think like what, and you think is like, and it makes you think after reading this book. It feels timely because you're just like, well, what has really changed? It just kind of feels like we're in another stage of this, even if we're
that.
clawing and fighting to get better, one step at a time.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, it's unfortunate that oftentimes it seems like, or at least there's the illusion that things are getting better, but then something happens and we're reminded that, oh, it's not so much better. Um, and like you saw, with George Floyd, or,
Mm-hmm.
and this book does remind you of that because, like, either one of us could be sent back there,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, we won't. No, like, no, they're not whipping slaves anymore, but still, there's disparity in incarceration, and healthcare and all kind of other things that,
And
while
there's
not
still a lot of
slavery,
bias against black people. And
exactly,
there's still a lot of racial tensions in this country.
right,
Even
exactly,
though we think we've moved past it, because you're taught in high school like slavery was a thing of the past. There's a and which
exactly.
I think is one of the big ironies of the book is that it's a time travel story about how we haven't really changed, how you can't change the past ultimately.
Yes, that is actually a great way to put it. I didn't even think of it like that, but that's very true. And it's interesting how both Dana and Kevin like the modern times no longer seems normal to them anymore. It no longer
Yeah.
seems home. Yeah,
Like I
yeah.
like either like her friend, her cousin, like oh god, I feel bad. I just finished this book not too long ago and I'm already forgetting.
No,
But
I
I'm already
totally get
forgetting
it.
details. But like I think it's her friend though. I think it's her friend and she goes up, she's like, "Did he like grow older? He looks old for some reason." She's like, "That doesn't matter."
Yes, yeah. I think that was her, or was it her sister? Yeah, because she thinks he's abusing her because she
Yeah,
comes
because she
back.
keeps coming back and
Beat
like she's been like
Yeah,
beaten up.
yes.
Poor Kevin, he goes to the ringer, like he gets like accused of like beating her up, and he's like, no, 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 no. But then again,
Yeah,
how are you gonna explain that? Yeah, and then they
I
grapple
know.
with that. They're like, how are we gonna like explain this? No one's gonna believe us.
No, and then Kevin is left behind for like 5 years, and he's like, he doesn't even know how to like work the television anymore, doesn't understand like how the stove works. It's crazy. Like how do they get readjusted now after being in 18 whatever, like early 1800s? I don't remember if she said the exact year, but it's crazy.
I think it was 1819, but I'm not sure.
With
I
the
could
next thing, okay,
I could be wrong, or maybe
okay,
1820. I don't know.
yeah, your memory's probably better than mine, I'm sure. Um, but yeah, I didn't even think about that. How traveling to another time period and you're there for several years, you completely forget, or you forget a lot of the state of society from where you came from.
Yeah, I was kind of snickering though. I don't know if you've ever watched Doctor Who, but the wibbly wobbly timey wimey stuff. I was thinking of that when she
Yeah.
brings him
Oh
back
yeah.
because he's like been
Yeah.
gone for like a few minutes. He's been gone for like 5 years. You're like, oh
I
whoa.
know. Like poor guy. No, I have not watched Doctor Who. I always it brought to mind to me from Heroes, Hero actually from Heroes who controlled time and living outside of time, he would age quicker than all the other characters in the show,
Mm.
and so you never think about that in time travel. So, but yeah, poor Kevin.
Yeah.
He's a white guy. I feel sorry for.
Yeah, and again, like he's and I don't know if another one of the things I noticed is that people are defined by the period they live from. No, that's not to justify. We still make choices, and those choices affect others, and those choices end up making us. And but I like that Butler shows that it's also the society itself that creates people, because
Yes,
and also she discusses kind of how a system as monstrous as slavery exists, and creepily enough how easily people get used to it, or well, how seemingly easy. I mean,
no, that's definitely true. What comes to mind when you talk about that is the scene in the book where the kids are acting out like a slave sale, a slave trade, like and to think that was they thought that was entertaining and that was okay, like us, like when I was a kid and we were mimicking Power Rangers,
oh yeah,
because
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
because that's all they knew, and the fact that they were all black and they were selling each other, that is a message that has implications throughout Black history of the blacks selling each other out in favor of for favor from their slave master or from whomever.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
there's like because my copy had like I don't know if you've seen, or well, I'm sure you've seen this in books, but sometimes in books they have like questions to ponder over after the story's over. There was one of them that discussed
hmm.
how this book explores the Uncle Tom trope.
Oh, really?
Because
Okay.
like
Yeah.
one of the motifs anyway I noticed from this book is survival, and like what
Yes.
people will do, because every human being has the they want self they human beings are programmed with self preservation. And you
Yes.
hear a lot
Yes.
of people in
Hmm.
modern time. I mean, we can look back in hindsight and go like, well, why didn't they like do anything? And she goes, here's why they didn't do anything, because it's like
Exactly.
they got like families and stuff, and like if you act it out, then like they could a lot of horrible things could happen to you.
Yeah, exactly. So often we judge others through a modern lens, but we have no clue how we handle a situation like that. If my, I don't have kids, but if I had kids, and if I acted in a way the slave master didn't approve of, he would sell them, or he would separate me from my wife and sell me or sell her. I mean, these are the things you have to think about,
Hmm.
which is, which is, I guess, why slavery, for lack of for a better word, was so successful because it broke these people down, um, to the so emotionally and so psychologically that they feared they feared even trying to fight back or trying to get their freedom, because it's not them they was who would suffer, it's their family and their loved ones, and you have to think about that.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. There's one part where I guess the one part that really disgusted me the most is when the lady Sarah describes what happened to her children and how basically it was the wife's idea because she wanted to have more things. And I had to I
Oh
had
my
to
god,
I had to
yeah.
put the book down for a moment and just go like, and I was just sitting there and I'm like, God, I can't even imagine valuing people like so little that like they're things to that. I couldn't even comprehend it. I don't know. I texted you about it. I'm like, this is crazy, dude.
No, that
It's
just blew me away. I was like, so, because you hear about slaves being property or treated as such, but not on
It never
like,
really sinks in.
yeah, exactly. Until you read a scene like that, like you wanted a new couch, so you sold some people. Really?
Yeah.
I mean, what?
I mean, I'm gonna
Like,
laugh. That's awful, but it's just
no,
like
it's like
it's
you have
almost
to.
absurd. You're just like, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's how you value them. So, I mean, I could not.
It's like if
I
I
don't even
sold. It's like
know.
if I sold a couch. It's like they're basically like livestock at that point. You're just like,
Right. Exactly. And like in the and matter of the truth, the dogs that they use to chase the fruit, the escaped slaves get better treatment. Yeah. So then the people, yeah, that is probably one of the most memorable scenes. Is that even though it was like nobody got whipped or it was nothing brutal, but wow,
well, I
you,
mean, yeah, that did happen, but it was kind of
yeah.
like, there was the one part where I'm like, where like she goes to the house of, I think it's Alice and her mom, and the
Hmm.
guy just gets
Yeah.
like brutally whipped in front of like some like vigilante gang shows up and starts beating on him. I'm like, oh, okay. And I thought about it. I'm like, well, in that time, I bet they weren't particularly subtle about it. So I just kind of rolled with it. But
No.
she holds very little back.
Yes, no, she didn't. And I'm just curious, what went through these people's heads who could just easily beat and murder a random person just because their skin color was different? Um, like how did I don't like even today, I don't know how you can just mistreat someone because they're different for any reason and be okay with it. Like you can sleep at night and that's fine. Um, it's really insane. Like what kind of psychology is that? What is it, a mental illness? Like, I'm trying to hope that there's some humanity in these people and it's something else that makes them do these things.
Yeah, I mean, I guess another thing. I mean, I don't want to say I'm glad of, but I thought was admirable is that she, like, as Dana points out, this wasn't some like monster under the bed. It was just some guy
Hmm.
and who
Right.
sometimes did monstrous things because that's what his society required of him. Now there is a part of me that's like, where I was kind of like, would she come up with that conclusion while she's talking about it? But then I think about it, I'm like, well, maybe she's thinking back or something. I don't know. I'm probably thinking too
Yeah.
deeply than what she intended, but I thought that was a really good line because it's just like like it's like Nietzsche said, man is the cruelest animal, um,
That
and
is very accurate.
and it
Hmm.
shows like people can be freaking terrifying because I mean, you can see it with like the Holocaust or slavery, and it's frighteningly easy to dehumanize other people to the point where because you're taught that, and you're kind of like, oh, okay. And I think that's really where the tragedy comes in because I do think that Rufus is a tragic character. I mean, I imagine you were more like, yeah, fuck this guy, but fuck this guy. But
Yeah.
when I read him, I'm like, he didn't have to be this way.
No, he didn't. And he is a very tragic character, which, I mean, it's sad because all he wanted was a father's love. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, so your parents affect you for the rest of your life. Like how you're raised has implications to well into adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have one parent who despises you essentially, or at least acts like it, and then another parent who tries to overcompensate for that lack of love you receive from the father. His mother was just ridiculously fawning over him. And, like no wonder the guy just ended up so screwed up. So I did try to find some sympathy for him, but at times it was very difficult, you know. But that's his book overall. In your talk, you had a talk with Dr. Chase and Raph, and I remember them talking about psychological distance. Like the beauty of fantasy is you can maintain
Mm-hmm.
a psychological distance. I couldn't do that with this book.
Yeah, I imagine not.
Yeah,
And I mean,
yeah,
again, it's horrifying. You think about it. Like, just imagine, you're just sitting there, like, you could be, hanging out with your family, and then they're like, oh, they're getting sold. Sorry, bro. I have some debt. And you're like,
yeah.
what? And he's like, I have some debt. I have to get rid of your children. And like,
And
imagine how that felt. You couldn't do a thing about it.
nothing. And I really felt sorry for the mothers who carry these children to term only for them to be snatched away and sold. Or they have to sit there and watch their children be raised in slavery,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is one of the more unique things about American slavery that differs from slavery in the past is that you were a slave and you're for the generations, like families were slaves for generations, which
Mm-hmm.
was something that was just pretty much unheard of, before Americans decided to do that. And so that just adds to the tragedy of it all.
I mean, like Thomas Jefferson had to take out a condemnation of slavery, even though he owned slaves as well. He was a weird guy, but
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
he was a strange guy. But they had to take, because like slavery was such a big thing in the South. Like he had to take out a condemnation of slavery, and was basically like, we gotta get rid of that. Again, even though he owned slaves, again, weird guy. But I don't want to get into that.
No.
um,
Yeah.
and ultimately we end up throwing down in a war, so we could establish that no, this is wrong. This is horrifying, and it has to stop.
Exactly. At
And
least
then it's continued over the years because again, there's a lot of history there I don't want to go into, but it kind of goes back to
there's a lot.
I think is one of the themes is we can't change the past. It's impossible.
No, you can't.
But
And
you
even if
can change the future. You can determine the future,
you
which
can, you can.
um
Um,
now she doesn't go too into that because it's more about brooding about how you can't change the past, but I do think there's some hope there in thinking that you have the choice to change the future and make it better than it was.
yes, you do. And also sometimes you have to make sacrifices
Mhm.
in order to make changes, whether that's sacrificing yourself or sacrificing others. And the hardest part is sometimes you have to make sacrifices for someone who may hate you in order to help them become a better person. So, which I think Dana did that very well.
Mhm.
Even though even though I know at times it was pretty tough for her, well, extremely tough for her.
Yeah, she gets
But
like
she,
whipped and she gets
right?
beaten. She gets her arm torn off, which that's the beginning of the book, which
Yes,
is a great
yeah,
hook for the beginning. Is she's like, I lost my arm, and you're like, well, how the hell did that happen? I want to see more.
right, exactly. That was a great prologue because I had no idea. Even when you find out how she loses her arm, that's still it
I'm
still
still
was
not
kind of
entirely
surprising.
like, did he like, was he like holding on to her arm and it got cut
Yeah, I
off?
believe he. Yeah, I
I
think he
don't
was
remember.
holding on. Yeah, it sounded like he was holding to her onto her arm and wouldn't let go. And I guess that got the rest of her body went, and that was left
Yeah,
behind.
yeah, pretty
Totally.
much, and it got torn off, and you're like, oh god. But
And that was just.
I really
I mean, that was
find
just
that
so
this
sad.
story is really about the relationship between Dana and Rufus. Rufus is a kid
Totally.
from
Hmm.
the 19th century who, he's the average son of a slave owner, and Dana is a woman from the 20th century because this takes place in 1976. Um, and she ends up showing up one day and he's drowning and she's like, oh no, I gotta save this kid's life, and she does, and then she heads back, and then she ends up getting to know him, and kind of what goes to, going back to the theme of you can't change the past. She kind of goes, oh, maybe I can influence him for the better. She
Hmm.
can't. Where
No.
spoilers, she doesn't. She really doesn't. But it's really sad that she doesn't. Like, it's not a happy thing.
No, she doesn't. It reminds me of someone who's in an abusive relationship. Oh, I can get him to change or get her to change. If I do this, then they'll be a better person. And if I just stick to it, I'll hang in there with them. Oh, it's not me. It's his father. It's his mother. So I don't know. She had like I don't know, like Stockholm syndrome or something. If that's the right term. At some moments,
I
in
don't
my
know if it
opinion.
was I don't know if it was that. I would call it more like naivete, maybe, that
Okay.
like
Okay.
she,
Yeah.
or maybe it was like, or maybe it was just optimism, I don't know, but she thought maybe she could, make a positive change in, at least with this person. Like, with this person, maybe I could make a change. I
Yeah. I
could
mean,
make things better somehow, and she does not. And I think what's interesting about Rufus is that you get the hints that he certainly has that kind of warped mentality, because, at the beginning he's like he tried to burn his dad's barn down.
right. Yeah. And so it's like so anything. It's like he doesn't care about life. He has like a death wish throughout from childhood into adulthood. And I think he's a very very lonely person,
Mm-hmm.
and in some ways, misunderstood because he has no one who he can
Yeah,
relate to or can relate to him.
yeah.
Yeah.
And no, it feels kind of dirty saying that, because, he's like, oh, he owns human beings, and that's not cool in any circumstance. But but his dad wasn't very nice to him.
Yeah. Yeah.
I initially thought
Yeah.
like maybe he thought like his like I thought maybe they would run off or something, like him and Alice, like, because she says like, okay, Rufus and Alice are my ancestors, right?
Hmm.
Maybe he'll see the light and run off with her, and no, no, he doesn't.
No, he does not at all. And I'm curious to know. That's the only thing like time travel stories. Like, what would have happened to him had she not gone back? How would have things been different? Um,
I mean, I, 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 I may be a bit more, I'm a bit more jaded, but I think it would have been the same outcome.
hmm.
Just,
Yeah.
it wouldn't have, because Rufus is weird. Because, like, it's not necessarily that he changes; it's more like our perception of him changes as the story moves along. Or at least I thought so.
That's it.
I don't know what you thought. Maybe you were like, this kid, he's his shit. I
You
don't know.
know, It's sometimes I had hope for him.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when Alice finally starts to not technically fall in love, but I guess just kind of be okay with her circumstances. Like,
Yeah,
this is,
I think one of the most disturbing things about the book when I read it was like how casual it was when he's all like, I want to be with Alice, and she's like, she don't want you. He's like, too freaking
yeah,
bad. And then he's
yeah,
like,
make her want me.
yeah, and she's basically
Yeah.
like, okay, you can just go do that, and you're just like, it doesn't sink in, and then like later, like when I thought about it later, I'm like, God, that was fucked up, or at least I thought so. I mean,
No, it was fucked up. How like not only is like her true love taken away from her, but then she's forced to be with a man who enslaves her. That's I couldn't even imagine
And
like
again, it's like it's
like
so
who.
like casual too, and
Yeah,
it's like this messed up like boy meets girl thing, and it's just oh my gosh, it's just
yeah.
it's twisted,
like
man.
he's like he sees it as love. Like he truly is in love with her, which is and like they're together and they're a couple. It's so strange. And even though he essentially is raping her.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah,
like again,
but
it like
yeah.
I thought was weird. It, like or at first I was kind of like, is this how is she meant to do this? And I'm like, I guess so. It just kind of again just the casualness of it, but I think that's what makes it more disturbing. It's just like it's normal
Yeah,
for these people to do that.
yeah, it's an everyday thing. It's like selling people for couches.
Selling
That's what
people
you
for
what you
couches.
do. Just that's what you do when you're a slave owner.
Yeah, or
Um,
whatever the lady wanted. It was like I forget what it was, but she's like she basically wanted more things, so they sold the
right.
kids off, and I'm like that's messed up. And then
Yeah, I
later she's
mean,
like, oh, she lost her twins and went crazy. I was like, oh no. Moving
yeah, that's
on.
the yeah, that's insane. There's no excuse for that.
I'm like,
And
I don't feel bad for you, bitch.
right, exactly. To me, that should make you more caring about a mother with children that you
Yeah.
lost yours. Tragically, but
Yeah, like it's so
not.
bizarre. Like you mentioned this when you actually texted me this, and you're like, dude, the mental gymnastics these people have to play is insane. I'm like,
Yes,
dude, you're so right.
yes, yes. It's unbelievable. I mean, I remember one time a professor saying that white slave owners dehumanized blacks. So that was the only way they could be comfortable in their own skin by looking at blacks like non-human as just some property. Because otherwise, if you recognize them as human beings, it would just fucking traumatize you that you were
Yeah, you
doing
would
this.
just you would have to face the horror that you're like
Yeah,
you're basically treating them like animals, pretty much.
right. Exactly. So, looking at it from that perspective, I get it, but still, it's horrific and it's no excuse. It's inexcusable.
And like again, she doesn't like it isn't. I mean, I really love the film 12 Years a Slave, but it's
Hmm.
not like that movie where I will admit there are points where like the suffering is just like oh the inhumanity. It's just like in this world it's just normal, you know.
Yeah, that is very true. That's a good point. Yeah, 12 Years a Slave, they make it a point to show you how brutal things are. Where,
Which I mean, to
as
be
yeah,
fair, I mean if you've read the original book that was based on, pretty much was
mm-hmm.
like that. So it wasn't just
Okay,
it wasn't just dramatized for Hollywood, but there are points where it's like okay, yeah, I see where you're getting from. Still a great film though. I still love that film a lot,
yeah, it was an
um,
excellent movie.
but um, but with Kindred, it's more like this is just normal, you know.
And like you said, that makes it even more horrific. That this is really an everyday thing in the antebellum South, um, and no one thought on anything of it.
Yeah,
Just
like
like
she's like he's casually saying the N word, and she's like, "Hey, don't do that." And Dana's like, "Stop that."
right,
He's like, "All right,"
yeah,
because he's used to it,
exactly,
and you're just like, I'm like, "What do you want him to do?" I mean,
yeah.
and then I'm like, "That's so messed up." I'm thinking like that, but like, it's what can I say?
But yeah, I mean, you can't expect a white guy from Maryland, 1800 something Maryland, to know anything else.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, that
yeah,
doesn't make it right. I should say that doesn't make it right, but it's just that's just how it is.
no, yeah, exactly. That's just how it is. And fortunately, things have been learned from that period, and things have improved. But still, that some things still carry on, and will continue to. But Dana, I give it to her for still standing firm and never giving up
Yeah, I
on
agree with
Rufus.
that.
Yeah, I have to respect her courage and her bravery
Just a lot of
because
courage. I was about to say.
yes,
You put it like
yeah,
nicely.
yeah, and I really, I applauded her for that because man, he was a hell of a person.
Yeah, like I mean, I'll give this to Dana. Like she tried. Like she really tried. She
Yeah,
tried to set
yeah,
him on a I don't know, if good is the right word, but like a decent path where maybe he could see that like, whoa, this is messed up, and she fails, which is
Yeah, it's
Though
sad. I
to
mean,
be
she
fair,
has.
I think it's kind of doomed from the start because he has that dysfunctional family and he already has that
Yeah,
warped view, and how do I mean, it's like trying to go up to a Nazi and basically try to explain what they're doing is wrong. They're not gonna. I don't think they're really gonna see it.
no, they're not. Not and when you're raised in that and you're taught that from birth, it's impossible. You can't. I mean, it would take someone a really strong will and uniquely open mind to even begin to think about changing when they're growing up in such an environment. But and Rufus, sorry, he didn't have the qualities to do that.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that like you were like, yeah, he's basically just like an abuser, like he'll do these
Yeah,
horrible things and then like he'll kind of feel bad and he thinks like that'll make up for it, and you're like,
yeah,
dude, that's so
exactly.
not the point. No,
Yeah, I'm sorry I blacked your eye, but here's a bouquet of flowers. You
it's like,
know,
no.
like, no, 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 no.
But also how like
Yeah,
you like get so warped, you're just like, you know what? I'll just deal with this until. And also, they were slaves; they had no choice
they had no choice.
in the matter,
Yeah,
so that makes it even worse.
and and what's interesting about his father though was how even though he was a cruel bastard, he was a man of his word. He had a thing about promises, which was weird.
Going
Yeah,
back to that mental gymnastics thing you mentioned, like when
yeah,
like I texted you, I'm like, well, he treats people like livestock, but God help you if you try to back out of a promise. He's gonna
yes,
raise hell about it. And I'm like,
yeah.
this guy's freaking crazy. I
He's
mean, okay,
insane.
it's good that you value promises, but like that, I don't understand it.
Well, I guess it worked out for Dana because otherwise her letters would have never got to Kevin.
Yeah,
Yeah, because Rufus was not trying to send them, which is another ploy of an abuser. I'm gonna bribe you or I'm gonna hold something against you so you can't leave me. Um,
though I will mention it if there is one kind of issue I had, and I don't know, maybe it was because like she's trying to write it from the perspective of someone looking back, but I could be wrong. I might be looking too
mhm.
deeply into it, but they acclimate pretty well to the whole thing pretty quickly.
No, yeah, I said something very similar. I think I texted you that. Like, I'm like, I would be a lot more frantic if I was just thrown back to. It's
I mean,
like,
I'm not a black person, but like I imagine if I were you and you got sent back to 1820, I would be shitting myself. I'd be like, oh fuck, like
fuck this, yeah, and Dana's like, no, and even Kevin wants to go back. He's like, babe, we need to get out of here. She's like, no, I have so much more to do. We have this. I have to save Rufus, and I'm like, what is wrong with you?
like what are you doing?
Yeah,
No,
like,
you're just and you're like and they're just cool with it. Like even Kevin's like,
yeah,
he's just been gone for like 5 minutes. You're like,
yeah.
what?
So, right, like, okay, my wife just disappears, and I'm okay. Like,
I'd be freaking
yeah, that's
out. I'd
another
be like,
thing.
what the hell is this?
I would be too. And then she's telling him the story about traveling back in time, and he's like, and he's totally okay. Like, I'm just kind of
Now
listening,
I
and not.
will I will acknowledge that she acknowledges the absurdity of the whole thing. So that
Yeah,
doesn't make
true.
it so it doesn't make it as bad, but it definitely was like I definitely would not react as I definitely would be concerned at
Yeah, I would be
least.
too. Yeah, like they were very, very cavalier about traveling back in time, and Kevin and his wife just disappearing randomly, inexplicably. Um, yeah, that that is definitely a good point. I would not act like that. I would be going insane.
Yeah, I'd be like, "Oh my god, what's going on? Why are we here?"
Yeah,
Oh
and the
no.
fact that, and then she was only sent back apparently whenever she gets really scared. I would
Yeah.
be scared all the time, like so.
I mean, thinking about it, maybe it's like maybe it's another just like kind of feeding in just how easy it is to acclimate to things that are horrifying, But again, it was something I was kind of like, I would be way more scared if I were in her shoes.
I would be too. And even besides, trying to save Rufus, she immediately starts to help out Sarah and teaches the kids how to read.
Like get if you were a man, like you'd probably get your ass beat and like even more horrible things. But if you're a woman, like fuck that, you'd probably get a fate worse than death if you were.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I'm surprised, Rufus didn't try to rape her in the beginning.
Yeah, yeah,
or even his father, or whomever. I mean, she wasn't a docile slave at all. She very much was a woman of 1976 in 1819
yeah. And they're like,
and
oh,
spoke
you
and
can
act like
read and do all this
yeah,
stuff, and she's all like,
yeah.
"Arr," and then she's like, and then like I like how Rufus's dad's like, do the thing, and she's like, look, I don't know how to do that, and she's like, well, do it. I don't know. It's because back then they didn't know the medical science we have now, and Dana's just like
No, they
an average person like you or me. Like I don't know how to do any of the medical stuff. I mean, like a little bit
exactly.
from what I've learned
I
from my
just know,
house.
yeah, it's like I just know Neosporin and Robitussin. I don't know what you're expecting from me. Then they have that quack doctor who's
Yeah,
like,
that doctor's just
yeah,
she's always shit talking the doctor. She's always like,
yeah,
yeah, if you want to go die, you can go see that doc. He's gonna just bleed your ass out.
yeah. Like, what is he doing? Like, it's just, it's just insane. Like, they didn't even have aspirin,
Yeah,
or anything, and it makes you wonder how people live to be at elder age. Even though I know a lot of people died young, but wow, you had to be really fortunate to live to old age in that time.
but yeah, I mean, you kind of see Rufus become worse as time goes on, or
Yeah.
maybe he
Hmm.
just or maybe it's just he embraces more of what he is. I don't know, but
Yeah.
he's definitely again, I think he's definitely a tragic character, and like I said, I think there's a sense that he knows what he's doing is wrong, and
Yeah.
I think it. I mean, again, I could be thinking really deeply into this, but I do think there's a sense in him that he knows that what he's doing is horrible, but there's just a bunch of you know baggage there, and he just
Yeah.
he just wants
Totally.
to die because he doesn't want to handle this anymore.
Yeah, and I think when his father died, I think that kind of sent him over the edge a bit after that happened because he became pretty much irredeemable. At a
Yeah, pretty
point.
much.
Yeah,
Again, I mean,
yeah,
a laugh is it's sad and scary, but like it's like he's like take her out to the field, and he's like what? He's like
yeah.
let's do it, and she gets like beaten.
I know, and it's interesting because Dana, throughout the book, it's like certain things she said she wouldn't take, or like she kind of implies that she has a certain limit, but she never really reaches that until the end of
Hmm.
the book. Like the things she decides to endure and take, and for her life and to help this guy, it's crazy. And that's why I would it was kind of sad that he did die, because it's like, okay, you did all this for him, you endured all this for him, and only to have to kill him.
Yeah,
So
it was just kind of for nothing. Which again, again, this is a dark story, even though
yeah, it is.
it has this kind of speculative fiction bent to it. It's
Yeah, it is.
there's definitely this kind of sense of like it's a dark story, and she doesn't hold back on the more casual cruelty of slavery.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's very casual cruelty, and and so many. And you think about the people who may not have owned slaves, or just people who were just around at the time, and you were just a casual observer of it. But you would not do anything to act against it for fear. And so it's crazy. It's interesting
Yeah,
to
like
think.
rather it be like fear or just wanting to get on
Yeah,
or Again, it's just kind of like what makes the Holocaust, or I keep bringing up the Holocaust because a lot of people know what
No,
that is,
yeah,
or American slavery. It wasn't just like these creatures out of hell did it. It's like regular people did it. People like you and me were just or well, people like
hmm
people with my color were just
yeah,
basically treating people with your color like like again like animals.
yeah. I mean, I mean, you've seen it through our history. Like, yeah, I know you mentioned the Holocaust, but then you have, Hotel Rwanda touches on, atrocities in Africa with, warring tribes, and that's
Where they're just
it's
murdering each other, Yeah.
yeah, exactly. For just because I was born a different race or different ethnic group or just in a different country in the same continent or a different area. Like it's amazing the reasons we can come up with to hate each other. Um, and in this book,
And like
it
you
really
think about it, it's so pointless when you think about it because you're just like. But again, like one of the things I also like is that like she doesn't try to like moralize or anything like that. She's just like, here you go. I'll just show you what it's like, and whatever conclusions you come up with, there you go. Which as great stories should do, I think anyway.
yeah, exactly. Like yeah, nothing is shoved down your throat in here. And then you can come up with all kind of interpretations throughout the book of everybody's motives.
I mean, the cruelty in this is not very subtle, but I felt if it
No,
were more subtle, I don't think it would be as impactful a story.
no, and I appreciate that she isn't very descriptive because she doesn't need to be.
Yeah, she's basically
Um,
like, yeah, he just whips the crap out of her. Well, she doesn't say that, but she basically goes like she whips him, and
yeah,
you
right,
can just imagine what that's like, and you just got this like
exactly.
scar in your mind.
Yes, and then yeah, you see Dana when she goes back to modern times, and she's putting the medicine on her back
Yeah,
from
and then
the
like people are
yeah
like, "What the hell happened?" And like Kevin's like, "What the
yeah
hell happened?" She's like,
right
"I don't want to talk about it. It's a crazy
yeah
day." And then she takes
yes
him back, and then then he's stuck there for 5 years, and it turns out he became an abolitionist,
yeah
and apparently something. And there's pretty unsettling implications that something happened that he saw, but and there are some things he describes, but he just doesn't want to talk about it because he's like it was that it was that scary, it was that
yeah
traumatic
and
for him.
yeah and you can and I like that Butler did that because you could just imagine because your imagination sometimes is worse than what the author can come up with
Mm-hmm.
of what he had to endure trying to. I mean, essentially, I'm assuming he was like one of the people who kind of helped slaves escape or help keep them safe. And
Yeah, basically doing a proto Underground Railroad, pretty much.
right, exactly. And so, I mean, I can only, I mean, I can't imagine. Just like I can't imagine
I mean,
being a white
imagine the
person.
fear.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
And
even though, like, I mean, we can look in hindsight and be like, or we can look from our 2024 perspective and be like, oh, oh man, he's doing like he's doing a good thing. Like that's a good guy right there. But like,
mhm,
like imagine how scary that was. Like there's even
I
parts where he
know.
gets like chased out of town because they only thought he was doing it, even though he was doing
Yeah,
it.
yeah, exactly.
Even though he was.
Yeah, and I mean, and that takes bravery and selflessness because he could have easily lived a nice, comfortable life there, and he was a writer, which is a profession that's been around forever. He could have went back,
Oh yeah, they always talk
did
about
it.
their writing, which I think is
Yeah,
kind of
exactly.
funny. And then I'm like,
Yeah,
I'm just like, oh yeah, like they'll
yeah,
mention like, oh yeah, we wrote our books and stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah, they're writers. You're
right.
so caught up in the like stuff that's going on, and you're like, oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And so he could have easily just been a writer at 18, 19 and lived a nice, cushy life as a white man. Didn't have to own slaves. He moved up north and it could have been cool, but he decided to do something which was powerful, in my opinion. And so, and it gave the book, a little heart and wasn't so bleak.
I was thinking it was kind of a like a little. I kind of took it as maybe again I'm thinking too deeply into this as I tend to
Hmm
do, but I kind of took it as sort of a like kind of middle finger of to people who are like, oh, they were people of their time or whatnot, because like there
Oh
were
yeah,
people in the
yeah.
time of slavery who acknowledged like, no, this is really fucked up, and we need to stop this.
No, you're
And
absolutely
then
right.
we had a war to settle that because the white slave owners were like, no,
Yeah.
like how
At
much
least
money
according
these
to
people are
everybody,
bringing us, like come on, bro, like get out of here.
right, exactly. No,
Please don't
no,
take
that
that out
is
of
true.
context, people. Before
No, 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 you're absolutely right. I don't know if that was Butler's intention, but it still applies here. It is definitely a huge middle finger to people who, have that sentiment of their, yeah, they were people of their time. It was nothing they could do, but hey, but this person did something, so it's no excuse. I mean, just
like
be honest. They were scared.
I mean, one of the things I respect is that she never takes away the choice from the characters,
Mhm.
if that
Right.
makes sense. I
Mhm.
could be talking crazy here, but like she makes it very clear that whatever these people's baggage is, whatever they think, whatever they believe, like they still made the choices they made, and ultimately a choice. The old saying goes, actions speak louder than words.
That's
Um,
very true. Yeah, because
I mean, I
even
don't
with
know what you think
Alice,
of that.
no, now that I'm thinking about it, because I immediately thought of Alice when you said that.
Mm-hmm.
Because she very much made the choice. She eventually just made the choice to be with Rufus because there was no sense in fighting anymore because it was either that or death. You know, and I think that was a choice for a lot of people. It was either I do this or I die, or I'm maimed, or I'm
Or I
exiled.
get defiled because I'm
Exactly.
trying. I don't want to say the R word too much on this episode.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly. No, you're absolutely right. And so then, no, that's a good observation.
I mean, I think Alice is probably the most tragic character. I mean, my God, she was a childhood friend of Rufus, or well,
Hmm.
friend for
Yeah.
lack of a
Hmm.
better word, because like I
Yeah.
don't know, they're kind of again, it was kind of I'll admit I was a little surprised with what they let Dana get away with. Now it is explained that like they're kind of freaked out that she can just disappear. She can just disappear on random. But
Yeah. Yeah. And just come
but
back
like
years later.
I'm just kind of like wow, I'm kind of surprised they're not like a little more. Again, that might just be me with 2024 brain, but I thought that was interesting that they kind of let her get away with what she got away with, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm thinking maybe they were just so confused and kind of taken aback by the whole time travel thing that they honestly didn't know what to make of her or what to
I would
do with
agree with
her at
that.
times.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like okay, and then she was unlike any other black person they had encountered because she could speak well and
She
she
was
had knowledge
reasonably
of things.
educated. She could write.
Exactly. Yes, and she could
And
read books, and even the slave owner could read. Like they were like
or
pretty
they
much
couldn't
illiterate.
they couldn't read well. You could read
They
a
could
little
read
bit.
well. Yeah,
And then
and so
I do like when I do like when Rufus is like, "Hey, you can take care of my mom." And she's like, "Okay." Like and she's just gotten
and
like beaten up and she's like, "You know what? Fine. I'll watch after
yeah,
your mom." And then for a moment she's like, "Oh, well, she might have become a little nicer over the years." And then she's like dropping the N-word. I'm like, "Ah, well. Oh yeah,
yeah,
she's a
it
bad
was
person."
it was nice when it while it lasted. Yeah,
But like
yeah, that was like a full
she's
no.
nicer, I guess. I don't know. Even though she's still
Yeah,
pretty racist. Oh my god.
yes. I mean, I guess her being sick and then aging, that would change anybody. Not necessarily for the better, but at least it'll calm it down a bit. Whatever bad qualities you had, she doesn't have the strength anymore to kind of walk around and beat up on slaves to get them to plant her garden and clean the floors.
Yeah, there's
So she
another
has
thing
to.
where Sarah, who's like the like main like house lady, servant lady, She's all
Right.
like, she doesn't even do shit around here. Like, I'm the one who's doing all this. Like,
Yeah, and she tried, and I think you feel sorry for her. Well,
I felt really bad for Sarah. I'll admit, and
yeah,
and Nigel too. He was a great
Nigel,
character.
yeah, yeah, he wasn't that. He seems the only one that Rufus, I think, truly loved. Maybe is that Nigel, because yeah, because that was I think that was seems because he would beat Rufus' ass, and like Rufus, he would
I mean, Rufus
yeah,
is a kind of an idiot, but he's not that
yeah.
stupid. I guess.
No, yeah, no, yeah, because that seems to
Because
be the
like
only
I
person.
I like how Dana's just like I keep saving your dumbass. Like, why stop fighting people? It's like I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know. Maybe he, in some ways, knew that if his life was in danger, Dana would come, and that seemed to be the only person who really cared about him
In some level,
selflessly. Yeah. Whereas the mother, she was getting something out of it. So by loving and treating him like a 10-year-old all the time.
I like how he's just like annoyed by his mom, and he's like, I just shoo her away when I don't want her no more, and she's all like, so like what? You say mean words, and he's all like, sometimes.
Yeah, I know he was. It was terrible to her, and she's I mean, she's a tragic character as well because she was, I guess, never really accepted by that society because the Tom was it Tom Whalen? Or I guess
Yeah.
his first wife. His first wife did left or died. I can't even remember,
Oh, I don't even
but
remember that.
I think she was like his second wife.
Hmm.
So and she was from
I
more
kind
humble
of
beginnings.
lost any pity or whatever emotion I may have felt when Sarah was like, it was her idea to give up my children to get more
Yeah,
things. I was like, yeah,
yeah.
you're terrible. I don't. It's like I don't feel bad for you, bitch. You don't feel bad
Yeah.
when you're selling kids to get some more jewelry.
Yeah, you can't. No, yeah, you're right. That right there. And I had never even heard of anything like that, like during that time. But I know it. I know it happened. But wow, I mean, I could not imagine doing that for anything. Like I couldn't imagine selling my cat for anything. Like I don't. But a human,
Like
wow.
if I wanted to go buy a book or something, like I'd like give like a slave to somebody and be like, oh, I got this book. Like again, it's so like again, maybe it's 2024 brain or decency as a human being, but like I can't imagine just so like being so disconnected from like normal like empathy for other people that you do something like that and you don't even think about it.
Not at all. And it's worse that it was children, in my opinion. It's one thing if you sold off a fully grown adult, but you sold children who were stolen away from their mother and kept the
Probably never
mother. You
saw
didn't
them
even,
again.
yeah, that happened all the time. That happened every day.
Hmm.
Um, it's just sad. And
Also, when Rufus sells I forget the guy's name, but he sells like one guy away from just for looking at Dana, like for talking to Dana for like I think he was asking her something about. I think he was actually asking if she could teach her kid, he could teach his kids how to read or something.
yeah,
And like
something
he
like that.
sells
Something,
them, and you're like, oh yeah, he's a terrible guy now. If it wasn't
yeah,
already in doubt.
so, yeah, something very innocent. And he's like, no, no one talks to her. Um, I mean, and to have that, I guess if you had that kind of power, a lot of people would be corrupted easily if you had the ability to, or you had the agency over people to just do with them what you will. Um, I guess a lot of people it would eventually affect them, even if they tried to fight becoming that, like becoming like Rufus or becoming like his father. Sometimes, no matter how hard you fight to be not become something, it's inevitable.
Yeah, I mean, there's some like that sort of generational trauma stuff that I
Hmm.
see
Right.
because there's I yeah, one of the things I also noticed about this book is how it doesn't like how this antebellum South that we kind of hear about was a lie pretty much and how it was kind of built on cruelty and well, evil. That might be a loaded term for some, but I think it's pretty evil. And
No, it
like
is.
when you're in a society where cruelty is the norm and you're taught it, even if it's implicit, because there's always people who are like, well, they can't have all been that bad. I'm like, well, they were still owning people. They still had they still were viewing them like animals pretty much.
Yeah, because yeah, you have heard people say, well, there were some nice slave owners. There's no such thing, right? As so nothing nice about owning people.
Yeah,
But they were nice. If they were nice, they would not. They would
sure
not be owning people.
sure okay, they were humane, okay,
Yeah,
that's fine and good, but you're still holding up this awful system. And there's
exactly.
kind of I kind of thought that Rufus is as much a victim as he is as someone holding up that system, because he's taught cruelty at a young age, because his dad
Yes.
was a prick.
Yeah,
His dad and
and
mom
so
were not nice people.
not at all. And it's one thing for him to have witnessed his father being cruel to slaves, but his father to also be cruel to him. I guess it was the odds were stacked against him to become the man he did become eventually.
Which again, I don't want to sound like I'm justifying what he's doing, because
No,
I
not a
mean,
justification at all, but
but
it's kind
you
of
can you can understand it at least, or and again, I do think his story is a tragedy, because I think that on some level he knows what he's doing is wrong, because he in his warped way he kind of cares about Dana, because she's the only one who's ever really cared about him as a person.
yeah, because he always tries to do some grand gesture to make her like him again or forgive him. So yeah, so he does have some heart, some kindness, I guess, and like you said, in his own warped way. So which why I thought in the beginning he wouldn't have been a hopeless character, but in the end he was just not to be helped.
Yeah, I was about to say, sometimes you can't help people. As
No,
I've
you
learned
can't.
in
You
some
can't.
cases, sometimes people
No.
just are comfortable in their badness.
Yes, they are because it's familiar to them. It's like it's like poop. It's warm and familiar. So
And like it's sort of a it's an interesting I mean, it's interesting because like you see, because maybe again it's just me thinking too deeply about it. I've said
no.
this a few times now, but this is one of those stories you really have to think about. But again, I kind of view Rufus as much of a perpetrator as he is also just as much of a victim of this horrible system as all the slaves are. I mean, not like they are, but in a different way.
No, totally. And I think Octavia Butler showed that really well. Um, because whoever thought, you know, us two, like a black guy and a white guy, would be reading a book and feeling sympathy for a slave owner. I mean,
Or at
be
least pity, because
pity. He
it
felt pity.
wasn't
Yeah.
necessarily like it was like, oh man, I understand. You're like like, oh, he's a great guy. Or, well, I don't know. I don't think
No.
sympathy
Yeah.
necessarily means you think like he's a great guy, but it wasn't like, oh, he's just misunderstood, guys. I'm like,
Yeah. Exactly. Because who fortunately, I guess I mean I'm not sure how you grew up, but I didn't grow up in an abusive household, thank God. But
no,
um,
I
I
wasn't either,
know,
thankfully.
yeah, but I know people who have, and it does have, a dramatic effect on you, whether positive or negative. Some people grow up and take that trauma with them, like you said, generational trauma, and they become abusive themselves. And
hmm
others become the exact opposite. And unfortunately, Rufus was the former. He became an abuser himself, which is something he, no matter he fought, maybe just couldn't have helped.
Maybe again, it kind of goes back to that.
Hmm.
You can't change the past, but also
No,
there's some people you can't change, because you can't really, you can't. My parents always would tell me this: you can't make someone do something. You know, you have to let them
mm,
choose what they do. Well, the
that is
main
very
point is
true.
you can't make someone do something. You have to kind of, you have to let them choose what they're gonna do. And
No, that's very true. You can't, and I think all parents know that from trying to raise a kid. A child is going to do what they want to do. They have to learn on their own. They have to burn their hand on the stove a couple times before they recognize hot is not good. Fire bad. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
pretty much. Or you can't you can't control other people's actions. You can only control your own actions. Is another thing my parents
exactly.
like to say to me. Because
Yes,
I don't know if
that
it's
is very true.
necessarily Dana thought she could control Rufus, but I think she thought she could maybe at least influence him in a positive way,
Mhm.
as we mentioned earlier, in some way.
Yeah, that's
Which
the exact word I
she
was going to use.
does, kind of, but he still is just a mess. And
Yeah, in some
it's
small way.
it's
I mean,
revealed that there isn't any helping him. Even Kevin's like, this dude's he's too far gone. It's not even worth it.
yeah, not at all. Not at all. And Dana, funny enough, even though she was there for Rufus, she ends up, touching everybody there
Oh
in some
yeah.
way. You know,
It's
um,
also the ending's really bittersweet because, or maybe not even bittersweet, but it's kind of on a downer note because like they don't even find out what happened to Nigel, what happened to Sarah, what happened to the rest of, what happened to,
yeah,
um, him and Alice's kids, and they're just kind of like, well, what do we do now? Which I can see that disappointing some people, and I remember when I read it for the first time, I was kind of like, okay, that was oddly fitting. That was kind of,
yeah,
I don't know, I kind of feel dissatisfied in some ways, but that feels kind of fitting in some way because sometimes you can't
no,
get closure for things.
no, you can't. And to me, I mean, it's kind of scary actually because you don't know if they'll end up with someone worse than Rufus, or maybe there's hope and they'll end up with someone who will free them. Um, or at least maybe free them in their will. Like you had some slave owners who, like, when they die, I want my slaves to be
Yeah, I
free.
mean, like George Washington did it. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
I think Thomas
Hmm.
Jefferson also did it.
Okay. Yeah.
I could be wrong though. Again, Jefferson was a weird guy. Should make that a hashtag by the end of this video. Just like, yeah, he was kind of weird. He's an interesting guy. He had a lot of contradictory opinions.
That's what I heard. Like my husband is a huge history buff,
Hmm.
um, and so he can talk about American history all day, including Thomas Jefferson. He has a book, like a whole book about him, and like a pretty large book.
Oh, have you showed him Kindred?
I have, yeah, I've talked about it with him, especially our neighborhood and and what a coincidence that the setting is like right here. So, and he thought it was insane, and I told him he needs to check it out but he doesn't read fiction.
Mm.
He's such a nonfiction snob. But I was like, I
He's like,
was like,
read
if you
12
read
Years a
fiction,
Slave, bro. Ha! But yeah.
exactly, yes. But hopefully I can get him to read Kindred if he
No,
needs
but
to read, something like
But
that.
I thought the ending was it was kind of a downer ending because like I mean she kills Rufus, so basically all the effort she tried to do some good, at least in some way, it didn't happen. Rufus still turned out to become yet another monster, and
Yeah,
he tries to attack her, and he dies, and then she gets her arm taken off, and then they go over there to Maryland. They go to the other side of the
right.
country
Yeah,
and they're like, well, shit. Now what are we gonna do? Which I,
yeah,
I thought was a
yeah.
kind of fitting end because again, going back to I think that's a pretty apt kind of metaphor, I guess, for the fact that we still haven't quite come to reckon, or we haven't really reckoned with our history and entirely anyway. It's kind of going back to
No,
how much have things changed and how much have they stayed the same.
no, you're right, and also it shows no matter what trauma you endure, what you go through, you have to just keep going.
Pretty much.
You have to, yeah, like no matter what. Yeah, I spent several years in the 1800s. I was enslaved. My my husband had to act like my slave owner, and we had to,
Yeah, imagine telling a
you know,
therapist that and be like,
exactly, yeah. So now we just have to. Now we're back and have to go and live on life like everything's normal. So, yeah, it's crazy, and it was interesting for them to actually visit the site of the plantation, and
and like
it's no longer
apparently they
there.
burned the place down, and then she kind of puts it together. Oh, I guess they just burned it down to cover up there was a murder. Because like
Yeah,
if they had like
yeah.
murdered, that would have just been. I don't even want to think about it. But they
I know, yeah, yeah. They thought the slave, but if they thought the slaves that did it, yeah, that would have been horrible for them. So, yeah, it was a fitting end
getting
for
getting
that book.
getting ears lopped off would
Oh my
probably be
god,
a mercy if
yes.
they got found out.
How can that like that time? Like that reminds me of the story of Nat Turner when they like chopped his feet off and burned him up, and it's like isn't just killing a person enough? Like you have to. Why do you have to do all this? You have to mutilate the body. I mean, it's just horrible, despicable.
Fear.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true, and it's
So
yeah,
to make sure that the next Nat Turner didn't do that. Now, I
right.
mean, if it
And
worked or not, I mean, there was the John Brown. I actually have the Good Lord Bird over there. I hope to read at some point, which is about
oh,
John
cool.
Brown. I've always
I'll
wanted to
have
read
to
it
check that
because
out.
John Brown's another interesting historical figure.
Really? Okay, I'm not familiar with them.
um, basically, he was a precursor to the Civil War. But anyway, I'm getting off
Okay.
topic there. Um,
Okay. Okay, I have to check it out.
um, but yeah, I thought the ending was fitting. Personally, with the story is that sometimes closure just isn't gonna happen.
It's not, at least not the way you want it.
Like
Um,
we don't well, as far as we are aware, we don't figure out what happens to the gang, which I have to mention because I haven't mentioned because we've been talking a lot about Rufus and Dana's relationship and Kevin as well.
hmm.
The other slave characters are really interesting as well. I mean, I think they're really well drawn. They feel like real people, and you really grow to like them a lot. And they're also. I mean, it's not necessarily that it's not that there's I mean, it's not so over the top like they're getting beaten half to death every day, but there's always that sense of fear of what's going on.
No, it is,
But they're
and
also
I
just
love.
people, they got their families, they got things that they want to do. Sometimes they take kind of shitty treatment because they don't really want to, because if they fought back, it wouldn't fare very well for them.
No, and I agree. I liked Sarah a lot. That she took on that kind of motherly role for Dana and everybody there, and she was someone I really respected because not only what she went through, but how she handled herself and how she adopted all the
She's
other
probably the
younger
strongest
slaves.
character in the book, like not like strongest in terms of depth, but like strongest in terms of just like pure like courage and just like tenacity. Like she just keeps going, even
Yeah, she
though
does.
she's basically I mean my God, she might I mean I guess Alice had it worse than her, but my God, she goes through the ringer in that book,
No, she
or
does.
she already went through it. We don't really
She
see
went through.
her
Yeah,
we don't really see her go through it like with Alice, but we do like she lost like her family. I mean, not to death,
yeah,
but her family basically got sold away, and she's just stuck there. She doesn't know what happened to him. I mean, again, imagine that. Like your mom or dad, and your children just get taken away from you, and you don't even know what's gonna happen to them. Probably never gonna know what's gonna happen to them.
nope. And so like that's why I think the kind of juxtaposition of her and Alice was great because
Mm-hmm.
Sarah was like the strong, courageous one, and Alice, she broke down when she lost her husband,
And I mean that,
and then
and it's kind of,
yeah,
I mean, I don't, I should say I don't condone suicide, but it's hard not to see why she eventually, does what she does. Because I mean, like, my God, I mean, it's a bleak situation as far as
yeah,
Alice is concerned. I mean, she loses her husband. She basically gets, SA'd a few times and has
yes,
children.
hmm,
Gets those children taken away from her because
Mm-hmm.
Rufus got all, I forget why, but like Rufus got all pissed off, or no, she ran away again, and then
Exactly. Yeah.
he took him, even though he didn't. He just
He
took.
really didn't. He told her. Yeah.
He was like, I was
What
gonna
an
tell
ass.
her, and he's like, you still did it.
Yeah.
Again, you're just like, again, going back to what you said about like mental gymnastics. I'm like, oh my god, that is so not the point, dude. Ugh.
Not at all. Like, why would you, of all things you could have done, why would you do that to her, knowing that's all she had in this life?
I mean, look,
But
they might be, babies of SA, but they were still her children, like she's like,
yeah, and
I
she
mean,
loved the man.
she still
You
loved
know,
them.
and so many women had babies like that. So many black women, had babies
I
like
mean,
that.
even it's mentioned like Tom Wayland had a couple, maybe. Like
Right,
it's
he
never
sure
outright
did.
said, but it's pretty much like,
Yeah,
yeah, that happened.
yeah, all the time. I mean, you're a husband or you're a man. Your wife is essentially useless, or you're just greedy, or you're just a horn dog. Hey, there's a, you
Or
know,
dog. I like that.
yeah, yeah. So of course these women are your property. Why
Which
not
again
screw
is,
them?
which again kind of goes back to just like, again, just like I can't even, again, maybe it's 2024 brain as I like to call it, but I just can't imagine being that disconnected from like regular empathy and like human emotion where you can just do that without even thinking about it, because like, it's trained to you that it's normal some weird
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
I can't put it to
It's
words.
true. And it is unimaginable. And of course, yeah, we're speaking from this time period, so it's easy. But yeah, I don't.
I hope I
It's
never time
insane.
traveled to the antebellum South. I'll put it that way. I'm kind of afraid of what I would do. I don't know if I would.
Yeah,
That's kind of one of the other things she brings up is like, would you hold firm in this time period, or would you just go along with it like the other people do?
yeah, and that's something. It's funny. I mentioned something like that in my review I did that I plan to post, and it kind of reminds me of I can remember like a comedian one time was saying like a friend of his asked him if you had a choice, would you travel back in time 200 years to the past or to the future? And he said, "I'm black. What do you think? What?"
My brother, I'm going forward.
Exactly.
I like that.
Yeah. So I don't know what, and like how would I react to that? Like I can. Boy, I don't even. Yeah, I don't want to find out.
Yeah,
Not even.
I don't want to find out either. And like, if we went
Yeah.
back together, I'd be like, that would be weird.
Yeah. I know, right?
Like, are we?
Gosh.
We're like, oh no, it's like that book.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I wish I had the courage of Dana, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I'd probably be like, oh dear. They'd probably be like,
Yeah.
why are you dressed up in those weird clothes?
Right.
Oh yeah, that
Exactly.
running gag. You look like a man.
Oh yeah. Gosh, because she had pants on
Yeah.
and like yeah.
And
Oh
she's
my
all like,
God.
if you say I look like a man one more time, we're gonna have a problem. I forget exactly what she
Yeah.
says, but I had to crack and had to
No.
laugh at that.
No, that is hilarious. I forgot all about that. Yeah, and she doesn't change either. She keeps going back in the same clothes, and it's the same running joke throughout the book. It's
Yeah, where
like,
they're like, yeah, you look like a man, and
yeah,
she's like, what do you want me to say, man?
yeah. Exactly. I mean, we just moved. I was literally like putting shelves on the wall, painting or something before I came here.
Oh man,
Oh man.
but yeah, it's a interest, but yeah, this book, for as short as it is, I mean, again, like, I mean, this book is like 280 something pages, because like there's an essay in the back of this, and there's like questions and stuff.
I have to
Um,
go back and read the essay.
I don't know if you have the same copy on your Kindle, um, but again, I thought, like, one thing I thought was interesting, going back to what I mentioned earlier, is that she kind of takes, she kind of explores, because a lot of, she mentions like how there's a passage in the book where she goes like, oh man, we used to jeer at the black people who would, be subservient to the slave masters, and and then she realizes like there's not really a choice here.
No, yeah, it's not. And so that was definitely a learning
And
experience.
it might
For,
not even
mhm.
be, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but like
No,
I didn't like, it's not necessarily that they were like they loved like their masters or something, or it was that you gotta do what you gotta do, man. Going back to that survival motif, like you gotta, if you're gonna take some shitty treatment, fuck it, I gotta live for some reason. Because again, that
exactly.
self-preservation thing.
It does, and even though it's not slavery, a lot of people deal with that today on their jobs. You have a horrible job and a horrible boss or whatever, or work in horrible circumstances, but you have no choice because you have a house to pay for, a family to provide for,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all about survival or it's just self preservation. You endure a lot, just to keep yourself going day to day.
Yeah, like there's even points where she's like she even has to like beg like please don't hit me again. Like I will do whatever you want,
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and again you totally understand where you're coming from because it's like like would I do anything differently? I'd probably like please anything just make it stop. And again there's a that similar thing with kind of the I think also why people go along with things that are horrifying is because like that self-preservation thing. You don't want to be the guy out. You don't want to be you know
no,
at worst you might get like executed as like a inward lover.
yeah, exactly,
I don't know if
exactly,
that's what I'm not an expert in the history of
yeah.
slavery, but like I imagine it wouldn't have been good if you were like, hey, this is kind of wrong. We shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, and I'm
Kind of
sure
like
a
with
lot of
Kevin.
people.
Kind of like with
Yeah,
Kevin.
exactly. Yeah, and
He
I'm
gets
sure a lot of
chased out
people
of
felt that
town.
way. I know, and that probably happened. And because they saw what happened to Kevin, a lot of people like, I might not agree with it, but I'm also not saying anything against it. I'm just going to go home, have my family dinner, and be safe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's not necessarily a it's and I like that motif of survival not just with the slaves but also I mean we see it more with slaves because that's the focus of the story, but we also see it with like the the white people, and Kevin
Hmm.
also kind of faces that temptation. Do you want to just kind of pretend to look the other way or do something? And he does something because he's not a bad person at heart.
No, he's not. He's not. And even though it took just a couple of reminders from Dana to him to say,
Like he gets
yeah,
swept up a couple times where he's like, "Oh, it can't,
yeah,
it's not that bad." I mean, it's just like, bro, we have to sleep on the floor.
right,
That's
exactly.
pretty
Yeah,
shitty. He's
yeah,
like,
it
"Oh
is.
yeah." Oh.
Yeah, yeah. And even though you're not seeing anyone whipped right now, this is a plantation we're on, right? So, but outside of that, those kind of small reminders, he ended up being a really stand-up guy. So, and one of my favorite characters, actually. I mean, I don't know. I liked all the characters. It's hard to kind of pick one.
Yeah, I mean,
You
I
know.
remember when I learned that he like was helping slaves. I'm like, yo, respect, dude. Like,
Yeah, I was
like
like, that was
yeah,
a shock. I was like, oh, okay. He didn't just sit back and do nothing and just wait around for Dana. He's like, okay, I don't know how long I'm here, so I'm gonna help free some slaves.
it was
Let's go.
hilarious. He's like, yeah, he left because he was kind of weird. He would like talk to he would talk to the slaves like they're they were like, oh, that's weird. Like and they're
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
he's just like treating them like like how we're talking right now.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that would be kind of. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, because he saw them as human beings. He came up with a time where everyone was treated equally in a way, or seen as equal, and now they're not. And the funny thing is, they don't even see themselves as equal. Like they're like, why is this white man talking to us? So
Yeah.
that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
like so used to like cruelty and brutality. They're like, well, this guy playing us?
yeah, exactly. It's not even to be trusted. That's really
No, I
sad
mean that's like
when
a
you think about
throwaway
it.
line. Like it's not even like a it's not even like a big part of the book.
No, it's not. It's not. Which shows it's amazing how much can be discussed in such a short book.
I know, yeah, it's crazy. It's like, it's like when it's like reading a Great Gatsby or something. Like, it's a very short book, but like there's so much you can talk about in there. Which, great literature.
It does that,
Yes.
because you say so much with very little. You know, and The Great
Sometimes less is
Gatsby,
more, as people like to
yeah,
say.
that's true. I had to read The Great Gatsby now. I think I saw it was some chat where you said it was one of your favorite books ever. I think.
Oh yeah, it's yeah, well, I mean, I just brought that up because it is one of my favorite books. So I mean,
Mm.
it's 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 a it's also it's also really short. You could probably but this one's also
Mm.
very short, and you
It
could.
is.
I mean, I read this in like, oh my god, like a week maybe. It's very quick,
Yeah, it is quick,
like a
and
couple days maybe, might even be shorter than that.
yeah, if you're like, you're somebody who reads super fast, you probably could just read it in a day or two.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
yeah.
I usually read like 60 pages a day, but it was kind of weird because it was kind of. Did you ever read the Gentleman Bastards book at all?
Oh yeah, yeah,
It
definitely.
had like that similar like within the chapter. There's like the 1, 2, 3. It was kind
Oh
of that kind
yeah,
of threw me off a little bit.
yeah,
Not usually used to reading like. Now they're not as long as sometimes the Gentleman Bastard books can be, but it kind of reminded me of that. I was kind of like, oh, that's kind of weird, but it was
yeah. That's
fine.
true.
It
Yeah,
was a quick read.
yeah, yeah. Because the chapters are very long. You have like the sub chapters and whatever. Yeah,
But
it is an
luckily
interesting structure.
it's a quick read. Like it's not that big of a commitment. Like even if you don't like it, you won't like. I mean I'd be very sad if you didn't like it. I think this book is fantastic, but I
It
mean,
is.
even if
It's
you
a
don't care for it, I mean, it's not that big of a commitment. I mean, it's not like if you read Malazan and you're just like, what the fuck? I just wasted all the time.
exactly, yes, yeah. And this is a very easy read. Like not as far as content, but like as far as like language, and
Also,
it's
luckily, it just sucks you in right away, or at least it did for me.
it
I was
does.
like, because
It
when I
did like
read like,
from
how'd she lose her arm? Like, I wanna know about
yeah,
that.
yeah. Because I went into it completely blind, not knowing at all what it was about, and I'm glad I did because it was a hell of a ride.
Well, I mean, I won't pretend I went in blind because
Yeah.
well, I knew what it was. I knew the concept. Like I knew it's just she
Hmm.
just goes back in time to antebellum times for some reason. Um, I knew that, but aside from that, I didn't know anything, and I was very pleased. You know.
Yeah. Hmm.
Now I am also glad that this book easily could have become really contrived, but I like that Butler portrays what happens with such honesty that it doesn't feel
Hmm.
cheap. At least it didn't to
Yeah.
me.
No.
I mean, I am a white dude, so my perspective, different races of people have different perspectives. I understand that, I've read some African American literature, and well, God, I sound like a huge asshole right now.
No.
I'm so sorry. I sound like
No. You
I sound like that guy who's like, oh, I've read all these like, oh, I've read these books by black people, but no, my point being, this could have been. I know my perspective is different, but I think this easily could have been contrived, and it wasn't. So I was pleased with that. I don't know how
no.
you feel. I
Everything.
know you probably had a different perspective.
No, I have to agree. Everything felt very natural, in my opinion. Like the way the story progressed, the way the characters interacted. You know, outside of Kevin and Dana's initial reaction,
Yeah, I
you
was about to
know,
mention that.
yeah. Outside of that, like the rest of the story was, seemed to happen. It was very organic. Like okay, I
Nothing
can see
felt
that.
too like, oh, the inhumanity, nothing
No,
like that. Like
no, it
most
was
of it
very
felt.
subtle.
Well, I don't know if subtle's the right word, but it's very
Well,
like, it's
I'm
not in your
trying to.
face about it, I guess, which
No, it's
is.
not. It's not in your face, which I appreciate because I mean, there's enough books for that if you want something in your face.
I mean,
Yeah.
hell, I read I mean, I mean, it could have easily become like a preach fest where it's like, oh, look how evil all these people are, but it's she, again, like I said, I think she portrayed it with an honesty that I think a lesser writer wouldn't have taken the time to do, and I appreciate it.
No, no, she really
It felt real.
crafted.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, Yeah, it did.
Which
And
is why it
even the
was
side
unnerving to
characters.
me, because it's like this is very feasible, and this probably happened to a lot of people in the past.
No, definitely. And the fact that you spent so much time on even the side characters was great. It wasn't just about Dana and Kevin and Rufus. You know, Rufus' father, his mother. You know, this Sarah and Alice and Nigel, and even even the one guy who only had a couple of scenes and then was sold. You still remember
Because
him.
because she was teaching him how to read, and she's like, "Well, we can't have
Exactly.
that."
No.
They gave him
Yeah.
Mississippi. They're like, "Oh
Yeah.
man!" Like I felt bad when he got sold, and I'm like, "Wow, she's a
Yeah.
great writer." He was only in for like, God, what the fuck was like little more than like a little bit of the book, maybe.
Right. Maybe a couple of pages, but but he stuck with you
Yeah,
because of what
and
happened.
I should note, I mean, even though we've talked about the characters again feel real. Is the best way I could
Yeah.
describe it. Like none of them
That's very
feel
true.
like caricatured. Like some dude yelling the N word while just viciously whipping the slaves every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Like now,
Exactly.
if that had
Exactly.
happened, I probably would not have taken the book that seriously. But luckily, like again, I understand people are weird and we're not always subtle about things, and sometimes things we think, wow, that's ridiculous, actually happened. I mean, I imagine there were the slave owners who just were just vicious every 24/7,
Mhm.
375 or 365 days a week, or.
Yeah. Well, I think Octavia Butler did well because she wasn't
There
trying to
was
get.
humanity in there. It wasn't just like,
Yeah, exactly. She wasn't just trying to get this visceral reaction from you. That wasn't the point of the book. It's like I'm gonna lay this out for you, and you take from it what you will, and come up with your own conclusions and interpretations.
which,
But
that's what great
yeah,
stories should do. Yeah.
exactly.
And I think that Octavia Butler did it very well. I am really looking forward to reading more of her books sometime in the future. Don't know when I'll do
Yeah,
it, but I hope to do it at some point. I mean, I actually have Parable of the Sower over there. I don't. I'm not gonna pull it out, but it's on my very big stack of books on my couch. Um,
yeah. I downloaded Dawn, which is in her Xenogenesis trilogy. I haven't read it yet, but
it's
I
also
think
just
that's
again smacking my, kind of just kicking myself because I'm like, man, I could have been reading her earlier and I didn't, and I feel like such a fool now. I don't know if you had the
the same
similar
way.
reaction, but
No, I did too because I guess
I'm like, this
I
is
wasn't as
great. where was I?
yeah. I'm
Where
like
was the?
why
Why wasn't I reading this?
why was I reading like Robert Heinlein instead of you know yeah. But I'm glad I found her now. So it's a new author. I'm always happy to discover a new author, whether they're seasoned or not. So and she's a vet and she has a lot out there. So I'm glad she was able to produce so much before she passed on.
Yeah, I was also really sad by the end because I'm like, man, what a talent.
Yes,
And
yes,
I mean, and man, it sucks that she passed when she did because man, you know,
yeah. I would have loved to like just see her today or hear her today and
yeah, see her
what
still
she would
still
have to say.
publishing today, exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
And
and
apparently,
she would probably,
apparently, Parable of the Sower is very prescient to our times. So I'm looking forward to reading that to see how that goes. But hopefully, it will be as really good as this book was because I thought Kindred was great. Now that
yeah,
I think about it, it might be a 5-star read now. I was kind of on the 4.5 because I really have to think about it because I tend to be really picky with the 5-star ratings. But this one
hmm
might go on there. This book was great. Highly
yeah, it
recommend it.
was,
What'd you
yeah,
think of it?
phenomenal. No, I think no, absolutely phenomenal. A book that surprised me in every positive way possible because Octavia Butler is probably, at least from Kindred, is one of the greatest science fiction writers I've ever read. And I can
In
only, yeah,
one
I
book too, we can say that and
yeah,
not like get
yeah,
scoffed at.
yeah, right, exactly, exactly. So, and it was enjoyable. It was, in some ways a very difficult read. You had to, like, I think you said, sometimes you have to like put it down. Like, wow, did I just read that? Did that really happen?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I don't want to sound dramatic, but like there were points I had to I was so not like because like the writing was bad, but I was just so disgusted with what I had just read. I had to like
Yeah.
put it down and just like, all right, I gotta make me something to drink or something. It was a little
Yeah.
too much. Or not like I don't
Yeah.
again, I don't mean that in a bad way, but I was like that hit me. I need to chill for a moment before I get back to it.
Yeah. And like the emotional impact of this book would definitely stick with me for a very long time.
Um, but yeah, I think that's it. Do you have final thoughts on this book, Darko, before we wrap up here?
Just like every single person needs to read this book. Even if you aren't a reader, if this is the first book you ever read in your life, you need to read this book. Like,
Um, yeah, I would agree. Read this. It's apparently it is taught in schools, which I'm very happy about because I'm kind of sad that I didn't read this book. I don't know if I would have appreciated it in the same way that I do right now because I've because you get forced to read stuff in school and it kind of takes away the enjoyment. Um,
it does.
but please read Kindred. It's a fantastic book dealing with a really disturbing subject matter with grace somehow, if that's even possible. Because my view is, if it's something horrible, then like you're obligated to show it as it was. It's like there's not a lot of dignity in it, as far as I'm aware. That's why they're bad. But she
Exactly.
um but I am on the Octavia Butler train, people. Check it out. It's a fantastic book.
So am I. I'm the conductor of the train now.
Exactly. Well, Darko, thank you so much for joining me on this, and I'm glad we got to do this because, like, again, this kind of just came out of the blue, and I'm glad I'm glad we did this. We should do this again at
No,
some point.
yeah, me too, Britton. I really appreciate you inviting me on. This was fun. It was enjoyable, especially talking about the book with someone who's like a young white guy.
Uh huh.
They get the different perspectives,
And
but it's
like
cool.
I was also why I did this. I thought it would be interesting to hear our differing perspectives since
Yeah,
you're
but
black
we
and
shared
I'm
this.
white.
Yeah, clearly, but we had some similar opinions, quite a few similar opinions actually. So that was cool.
This probably sounds bad, but I felt a little better. I'm like, maybe I'm not like as complacent as sometimes I think I am. Maybe I'm doing better than I thought.
No, not at all. No, I mean, no, you had some great insight
But
into the story. Yeah,
Darko, if you have any social media you want to shill or talk about your YouTube channel, which again, check it out. He's really cool. He's just starting out. Um,
yeah. Kindles and Kicks on YouTube, and also Kindles and Kicks on Twitter, aka X. I still call it Twitter. I'm an '80s baby. It's still
yeah,
Twitter to me.
yeah. I'm the
So,
same way. I just call it
yeah,
Twitter.
yeah. So yeah, you can find me on there too.
All right. Well, thanks, man. This was great. I'm gonna have to get you on for Prince Hangout Hour soon because this was
Oh
great.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I look forward to that, man.
All right. Well, take care, everyone. This was our discussion of Kindred. Go read this book, or blah blah. Go read this
Definitely.
book. Just get off the
Right
side.
now. Yeah.
Yeah, just right now.